The crystal chandelier cast dancing shadows across the mahogany dining table as I balanced 3 plates on my left arm, my right hand gripping a pitcher of fresh lemonade. The familiar weight of servitude pressed down on my shoulders like a lead blanket I'd worn for 23 years. "Emma! The ice is melting in Mr. Blackwood's glass." My mother's shrill voice cut through the polite dinner conversation. "And bring the good silverware from the china cabinet. What will he think of us?" I bit back the response that clawed at my throat. "He'll think you're exactly what you are, social climbers who treat their own daughter like hired help." Instead, I smiled the practiced smile that had become my mask and hurried to fulfill her demand. According to YouTube analytics, 99.5% of viewers are not subscribed. That's a huge number. By subscribing the channel that is completely free, you'll help support the channel and never miss fresh content. Richard Blackwood, CEO of Blackwood Industries, sat at the head of our dining table like visiting royalty. My parents flanked him on either side, their faces glowing with the desperate hunger of people who believed proximity to wealth might somehow transfer prosperity to them. They'd been cultivating this dinner invitation for months, ever since my father's accounting firm had started handling some of Blackwood's smaller subsidiary accounts. "This roast is exceptional, Mrs. Chen," Blackwood said, cutting into the meat I'd spent 4 hours preparing. "You have quite the culinary skills." My mother preened, her chest puffing with borrowed pride. "Oh, you're too kind. It's just something I threw together." She didn't even glance my way as she claimed credit for my work. From the kitchen doorway, I watched this familiar theater of lies. My parents had perfected the art of taking credit for my accomplishments while treating me like their personal servant. The house they bragged about? I'd saved for years from my freelance graphic design work to help with the down payment. The garden Blackwood had complimented? My hands had planted every flower and trimmed every hedge. The meal he was praising? I'd planned, shopped for, and prepared every bite. "Emma!" my father's voice boomed. "Where's the wine I asked for?" "We can't keep Mr. Blackwood waiting." I hurried to retrieve the bottle, noting how my father spoke to me like I was staff while putting on his most ingratiating smile for our guest. As I poured the wine, Blackwood looked up at me for the first time that evening. "You seem to handle everything around here," he observed. "What do you do for work?" Before I could answer, my mother jumped in. "Oh, Emma just helps around the house. She's not career-minded like some young people. We're grateful she's content to support the family." Content. The word tasted like ash. There was nothing content about watching my design portfolio gather dust while I cooked, cleaned, and played unpaid housekeeper. There was nothing content about having my achievements stolen and my dreams dismissed as hobbies. "I see," Blackwood said, but his eyes lingered on me with what looked like curiosity rather than the dismissal I expected. "Well, supportive family is important." The evening continued its predictable course. My parents regaled Blackwood with stories of their successes that were either embellished or outright fabricated. They spoke about their beautiful home and their upcoming vacation to Europe, paid for with money I'd contributed from my freelance work. They painted themselves as pillars of the community while I remained invisible, refilling glasses and clearing plates like a ghost who happened to share their DNA. After Blackwood left, my parents were electric with excitement. "Did you see how impressed he was?" my mother gushed, finally acknowledging my presence now that their performance was over. "Emma, you did well tonight. Mr. Blackwood seemed very pleased with dinner." "With the dinner I cooked," I said quietly. My father waved dismissively. "Don't be difficult. We all contributed to tonight's success. Now clean up. I want everything spotless before morning. Mr. Blackwood might stop by again soon, and we need to maintain appearances. I stared at the mountain of dishes, the stained tablecloth, the crumbs scattered across the hardwood floors I'd mopped that morning. Something inside me finally snapped, not with rage, but with cold, crystalline clarity. That night, after my parents had gone to bed, I sat at my laptop and did what I should have done years ago. I updated my portfolio website, polished my LinkedIn profile, and began reaching out to contacts in the design industry. If my parents wanted to play games of deception and credit stealing, perhaps it was time they learned I could play too. 3 weeks later, the call came. "Is this Emma Chen?" The voice was crisp, professional. "Yes, this is Emma. This is Jennifer Walsh from Blackwood Industries. We received your portfolio submission, and Mr. Blackwood would like to meet with you regarding a position with our marketing team. Would you be available Tuesday at 10? My hands trembled as I held the phone. "Yes, absolutely. I'll be there." I'd submitted my portfolio on a whim, never imagining it would lead anywhere. But apparently, Richard Blackwood had done more research into the Chen family than my parents realized. The Blackwood Industries building rose like a glass and steel monument to success. As I walked through the polished lobby in my best interview suit, I felt like I was entering a different world, one where competence mattered more than family connections or social climbing. Jennifer Walsh, the marketing director, greeted me with a firm handshake and a genuine smile. "Mr. Blackwood spoke very highly of you after meeting you a few weeks ago. He was particularly impressed by your work on the Meridian Hotel campaign." I blinked in surprise. He knew about that? Richard makes it his business to know about talent. After dinner at your parents' house, he did some digging into local design firms. Your work stood out immediately. The question is, are you interested in bringing those skills to a larger canvas? The interview lasted 2 hours. We discussed my vision for modern marketing, my experience with digital campaigns, and my ideas for expanding Blackwood's brand presence. Jennifer introduced me to the team, creative, driven people who spoke my language of innovation and excellence. At the end, Richard Blackwood himself appeared. "Ms. Chen," he said, extending his hand, "I hope Jennifer has given you a good sense of what we're building here." "She has. It's exactly the kind of environment I've been hoping to find." "Excellent. I'll be frank. I need someone who can take initiative, someone who isn't afraid to lead. I saw something that night at dinner, the way you managed everything seamlessly while maintaining your composure. That's executive material." My heart raced. Executive material? We're creating a new position, Creative Director of Brand Strategy. It would involve overseeing a team of 12 and working directly with our major clients. The salary is $120,000 to start, plus benefits and equity options. Interested? I barely managed to keep my voice steady. Very interested. "Then welcome to the team, boss." The word hit me like lightning. Boss. After years of being treated like invisible help, someone was calling me boss. I started the following Monday. The job was everything Jennifer had promised: challenging, creative, and rewarding. I threw myself into the work with the passion of someone finally given the chance to prove herself. Within my first month, I'd restructured our client approach and increased engagement rates by 30%. Meanwhile, I said nothing to my parents about my new position. I left each morning in business attire, telling them I was running errands or meeting friends. They were too absorbed in their own concerns to ask for details. My father was busy preparing for another meeting with Blackwood's accounting team, while my mother planned an elaborate dinner party to show off their connection to the CEO. The deception felt strangely liberating. For the first time in years, I had something that was entirely mine, a success they couldn't claim or diminish. 2 months into my new role, my father came home with exciting news. Emma, you'll never believe it. Richard Blackwood wants to have dinner with us again. This time he's bringing some of his executive team. Your mother and I think he might be considering expanding his account with my firm. My mother was practically vibrating with excitement. We need to make this dinner even more impressive than the last one. Emma, I'll need you to prepare that 7-course meal you made for the Johnsons last year. And flowers. We need fresh arrangements throughout the house. Oh, and make sure you polish all the silver. I looked at my parents, really looked at them, and saw them clearly for perhaps the first time. They weren't evil people, just deeply flawed ones who'd convinced themselves that using their daughter was somehow normal. They'd built their entire identity around appearances and borrowed prestige, never realizing that their foundation was crumbling. Of course, I said, I'll make sure everything is perfect. The night of the dinner party, I prepared everything exactly as my mother requested. The house sparkled, the flowers were arranged with artistic precision, and the 7-course meal was ready to perfection. My parents dressed in their finest clothes and rehearsed their talking points like actors preparing for opening night. The doorbell rang at exactly 7 o'clock. Emma, get the door! My mother called from upstairs, still fussing with her jewelry. I opened the door to find Richard Blackwood standing on our doorstep, accompanied by Jennifer Walsh and 2 other executives I recognized from the office. Good evening, Ms. Chen, Blackwood said, his eyes twinkling with something that looked suspiciously like mischief. I hope you don't mind. I brought some colleagues who were eager to meet your family. Not at all. Please come in. My parents appeared at the top of the stairs, descending like royalty greeting their subjects. The performance began immediately. Richard, my father boomed, arms spread wide. So wonderful to see you again. And you've brought friends. How delightful. James, Helen, Blackwood replied smoothly. I'd like you to meet some of my executive team. Jennifer Walsh, our marketing director. David Chen, no relation, I assume, our CFO, and Sarah Martinez, head of operations. The introductions were made with great ceremony. My parents practically genuflected as they shook hands with each executive, their eyes bright with the reflected glory they imagined they were basking in. Please, let's move to the dining room, my mother said. Emma has prepared something special for tonight. As we walked through the house, I caught Jennifer's eye. She gave me the slightest wink, the conspirator signal I'd been waiting for. The dinner conversation followed the same script as before. My parents dominated the discussion, sharing embellished stories about their accomplishments and dropping names of people they barely knew. They spoke about their successful business ventures and their plans for expansion, painting themselves as entrepreneurs and community leaders. Through it all, I served silently, playing my assigned role as the invisible daughter. I watched my parents perform their elaborate deception while Blackwood's team observed with polite smiles and knowing glances. Finally, as I served dessert, a chocolate soufflé that had taken 3 hours to prepare, Blackwood cleared his throat. James, Helen, I have to say, you've created a lovely home here. The attention to detail is remarkable, my mother beamed. We do try to maintain certain standards. Indeed, the meal has been exceptional as well. You both must be excellent cooks. Oh, we dabble, my father said modestly, never acknowledging that he'd never prepared a meal more complex than instant coffee. I'm particularly impressed, Blackwood continued, by the level of organization and management I've observed this evening. Everything runs so smoothly, like a well-orchestrated operation. My parents exchanged proud glances. They were eating up every word. In fact, Blackwood said, it reminds me of someone I know who has that same gift for making complex things look effortless. someone who can manage multiple projects simultaneously while maintaining the highest standards of quality. "Oh, you flatter us," my mother giggled. "Actually," Blackwood said, his voice taking on a different tone, "I was talking about your daughter." The room went silent. My parents stared at him in confusion. "I'm sorry," my father said. "Emma. I was describing Emma." Blackwood turned to look at me directly. "Would you like to tell them, or should I?" I felt every eye in the room turn to me. This was the moment I'd been both dreading and anticipating. I set down the dessert plates and looked at my parents, really looked at them, seeing their confusion and the first flickers of concern. "Tell us what?" my mother asked, her voice rising slightly. I straightened my shoulders and found my voice. "I work for Mr. Blackwood. I'm the creative director of brand strategy at Blackwood Industries." The words hung in the air like smoke after an explosion. My parents stared at me, then at Blackwood, then back at me, their faces cycling through confusion, disbelief, and dawning horror. That's not possible," my father stammered. You help around the house." "I help around the house," I said calmly. "And I run a team of 12 designers, and I manage million-dollar marketing campaigns, and I report directly to the CEO of one of the largest companies in the state." My mother's face had gone pale. "But you never told us." "When?" I asked. "When you were ordering me to clean bathrooms? When you were taking credit for my cooking? When you were introducing me to your friends as your helpful daughter who isn't career-minded?" Jennifer Walsh leaned forward. "Emma's being modest. She's one of the most talented creative directors I've ever worked with. In just 2 months, she's revolutionized our entire approach to client relations." "Her team calls her boss," Sarah Martinez added with a smile. "And she's earned that title." The word hit my parents like a physical blow. Boss. The daughter they'd treated as a servant was someone else's boss. "I don't understand," my mother whispered. "How long have you been working there?" "Since 3 weeks after your first dinner with Mr. Blackwood," I said. "The night you claimed credit for my cooking and dismissed me as not career-minded, I decided to show you exactly how career-minded I could be." My father's face was red now, embarrassment and anger warring for control. "Why didn't you tell us?" "The same reason you never asked," I replied. "Because you were never really interested in who I was beyond what I could do for you." Blackwood cleared his throat gently. "I should explain my role in all this. After that first dinner, I was curious about the dynamic I'd observed. Emma seemed to be managing everything while you both took credit for her work. So I did some research." "Research?" My mother's voice was barely audible. "Emma's portfolio is remarkable. Her work on local campaigns, her freelance projects, all done while maintaining your household, apparently. When I discovered her talent was being wasted, I made sure she had an opportunity to shine." David Chen nodded. "Emma's Meridian Hotel campaign was brilliant. That's actually what caught Richard's attention initially." I watched my parents' faces as the full scope of their miscalculation became clear. They'd been so busy performing their charade of success that they'd never noticed their daughter actually achieving it. "So when you invited us to dinner tonight," Blackwood continued, "I thought it might be educational for everyone involved. I wanted to see if you'd finally acknowledge Emma's contributions to your household, and to observe how you'd react when her true accomplishments came to light." The silence that followed was deafening. My parents sat frozen, their carefully constructed world crumbling around them. Finally, my father found his voice. "Emma, we had no idea." "You had every opportunity to have an idea," I said, my voice steady but firm. "You chose not to see me as anything more than free labor. You chose to take credit for my work and dismiss my ambitions. You chose to treat your own daughter like hired help." My mother's eyes filled with tears. "We never meant, we just thought." "You thought I was content to be invisible. You thought my dreams didn't matter as long as your appearances were maintained. You thought you could use me without consequence." Jennifer Walsh stood up. "I think we should go. This seems like a conversation the family needs to have privately." As Blackwood's team prepared to leave, he turned to my parents one final time. "James, Helen, you have a remarkable daughter. I hope you'll take the time to get to know her properly." He looked at me. "Emma, I'll see you Monday morning. We have that presentation to the Morrison account." "I'll be ready," I said. The words felt like a promise, and a declaration of independence rolled into one. After they left, the house fell into an oppressive quiet. My parents sat at the dining table, staring at the remnants of the meal I'd prepared, a meal they'd planned to take credit for once again. "How long?" my mother finally asked. "How long? What? How long have you resented us?" I considered the question carefully. I don't know if resentment is the right word. Disappointed? Years. Invisible. Most of my life. Ready for change? Since the moment Richard Blackwood called me boss, and I realized that's how I deserved to be treated. My father looked up at me, and for the first time in memory, I saw him really seeing me. "We failed you." "Yes," I said simply. "You did. Is there any way to fix this?" I looked at my parents, these people who'd raised me, provided for me, loved me in their own flawed way, but who'd never truly seen me. The anger I'd carried for so long had transformed into something else: clarity. "I don't know," I said honestly, "but I know it starts with you seeing me as I actually am, not as who you need me to be. I'm not your maid. I'm not your supporting cast member. I'm your daughter, and I'm successful, and I have dreams and ambitions that matter." Over the following weeks, our family dynamic shifted seismically. My parents struggled with the reality that their helpful daughter was actually a high-powered executive. They apologized repeatedly, sometimes genuinely, sometimes defensively, and slowly began to acknowledge the ways they diminished and used me. The changes weren't immediate or complete. My mother still occasionally slipped into ordering me around before catching herself. My father still struggled with the concept that his daughter out-earned him. But they were trying, and that effort meant something. At work, I continued to excel. The Morrison presentation was a success, leading to a promotion and a significant raise. My team respected me, my colleagues valued my input, and Richard Blackwood became not just my boss, but a mentor who saw my potential and helped me develop it. 6 months after that revelatory dinner party, my parents threw another gathering, but this time they introduced me properly. "This is our daughter Emma," my father said to their guests. "She's the creative director at Blackwood Industries." The pride in his voice was genuine, even if it was long overdue. As I stood in the living room, surrounded by people who now knew my real accomplishments, I thought about the journey that had brought me here. It hadn't been about revenge, exactly. It had been about finally demanding the recognition and respect I'd always deserved. Richard Blackwood approached me during the party, a knowing smile on his face. "How does it feel?" he asked. "Different," I said. "Better. Honest. Good. I've been thinking about expanding your role again. We could use a VP of creative strategy." I looked around the room, at my parents, who were finally seeing me clearly, at the life I'd built through my own talent and determination, at the future that stretched ahead of me, bright with possibility. "I'd like that very much," I said. "Boss," he laughed. "I think you're going to do just fine, boss." And for the first time in my life, I knew he was right. I was going to do more than fine. I was going to soar. The girl who'd been treated like a maid had become a woman who commanded boardrooms, and that transformation wasn't just about job titles or salary figures. It was about finally, truly, knowing my own worth. The crystal chandelier still cast dancing shadows across my parents' dining room, but I no longer stood beneath it as a servant. I stood as an equal, as a success story, as someone who demanded better and received it. The weight of servitude had been replaced by the strength of self-respect, and that made all the difference in the world. Sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's simply becoming so undeniably successful that the people who underestimated you have no choice but to see you as you truly are. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, they'll even learn to be proud of you for it.